Hi. For the last few weeks, I've been doing the sermon every week on our YouTube and Facebook. But now, when we're starting the season of creation, I'd like to introduce my husband, Reverend Bill Welch, to share in the preaching for the next few weeks. The season of creation is something that is an ecumenical movement to remind us about the creation that we're living in. We are taking part in this for the first time this year. Our readings will be different from those that have been set out in the lectionary. They all reflect the season of creation and have a different meaning, which we will take the opportunity to reflect on over the next few weeks. Bill? Thank you for coming and sharing in the preaching responsibilities.
Thank you for having me. It's a privilege to be able to do so. The readings for this week are written in the book, Paul's book to the Romans and the Gospel of Matthew. The first reading is from the book of Romans chapter 13, verses 8 to 15. Owe no one anything except to love one another, for the one who loves another has fulfilled the law. The commandments, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not covet, and any other commandments are summed up in this word: love your neighbor as yourself. Love does no wrong to a neighbor, therefore love is the fulfilling of the law. Besides this, you know what time it is, how it is now the moment for you to wake from sleep. For salvation is nearer to us now than when we became believers. The night is far gone, the day is near. Let us then lay aside the works of darkness and put on the armor of light. Let us live honorably as in the day, not in reveling and drunkenness, not in debauchery and licentiousness, not in quarreling and jealousy. Instead, put on the Lord Jesus Christ and make no provision for the flesh to gratify its desires. In the reading from Matthew 18, verses 15 to 20. If another member of the church sins against you, go and point out the fault when the two of you are alone. If the member listens to you, you have regained that one. But if you are not listened to, take one or two others along with you, so that every word may be confirmed by the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses. If the member refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church. And if the offender refuses to listen even to the church, let each one be to you as a Gentile and tax collector. Truly I tell you, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. Again, I truly tell you, if two of you agree on earth about anything you ask, it will be done for you by my Father in heaven. For where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, I am there among them. The theme for this sermon series centers around creation. Nothing new for most of us, but an important topic to remind us of our place in the universe. The Bible begins with a story about creation. It is a story not to be taken literally, but as a metaphor for how things came to be, who made the earth, and where humankind fits into creation. God gives humankind the task of looking after creation as stewards or caretakers of what God has made. Thus, though we have a checkered history regarding exercising our care of God's gifts, so we definitely have room for improvement. That being said, being a steward of God's creation is about relationship. We have a relationship with one another, with plants, animals, water, and land. We are interrelated, and this has become even more clear through the past 5 months with the COVID-19 virus. It has, or should have, shattered any illusions that humankind has about being independent or separate from one another. This pandemic has cemented the reality that relationships are vital. If we do not work together on this, then all of us are in jeopardy. And we know that relationships can be simple or complex, easy or difficult, depending on the circumstances, whether it be with people, with animals, or the land. For us not to be be in relationship with someone or something, we basically have to be dead. Thus, we have no choice but to be in relationship. The question is how we will choose to relate to one another, and that's something for us to consider. And what do relationships require of us? They require a few important characteristics like respect, humility, accountability, love, equality, and maturity. This list is not exhaustive, but it touches on the main tenets and the main point I'm trying to make. The readings for this week center around these characteristics. Communal obligations and accountability are central in the Christian context. In Matthew chapter 18, we read of the procedure to call a community member to account for their actions. We do not know what the actions were, but they were probably serious enough to warrant an intervention. First, it is person to person. If that doesn't work, then it's 2 or 3 people. If that intervention doesn't work, it's taken to the community as a whole. If that doesn't work, then the person is basically excommunicated from the community until reconciliation or a resolution has been made. It's important to note that in this passage as well, it is sandwiched between the parable of the wandering sheep and the unforgiving servant. Looking for the one that has wandered away is paramount to the shepherd. It mirrors the old adage, no one left behind. The parable of the unforgiving servant also highlights the importance of relationship, one's ability to extend and receive forgiveness. And for example, in the community intervention, humility is required from both the offender and the offended. Humility in speech and hearing is essential. There must be accountability for one's actions. And calling one another to account is not easy. Neither is being called to account. And this is where love and humility are at the forefront. The ability to be honest with oneself makes a big difference in whether reconciliation is possible. Personal accountability requires a certain level of maturity to succeed and in advancing and deepening relationships. Conversely, the opposite is true. When accountability is not accepted, relationships can be impaired and become stagnant. Blaming other people or circumstances for one's actions can become the excuse to avoid taking responsibility. And this is indeed rampant in all levels of society today. Statements like, "I was misquoted," or "it's fake news" come to mind. The inability or unwillingness of people to own up to the mistakes has serious repercussions for our society and for the earth. For example, not wanting to be held accountable is by extension a form of entitlement, which is also detrimental to relationships. Entitlement, or the feeling that a person does not have to abide by rules or guidelines or suggestions, or in the reading from Romans, the 10 Commandments, is important because we need to be able to look at the options that we have. But people who are entitled feel like they don't need to follow, and so there's an option for them not to follow. And they feel like they are special. If you confront someone publicly, for example, and you've probably seen this on YouTube or videos or shows, if you confront someone publicly and politely about how they're acting, you may get a verbal tirade or a physical response. Of course, when we look at this, we know that ridicule is part of it. And why is that? Why is it's such a burden when people don't want to be held to account? But it happens everywhere. And if we feel entitled to take whatever we want or do whatever we want because the rules don't apply, think about how that might affect creation. If we extract and extract and extract all the resources from the earth without giving anything back, we will be in danger. One's influence affects another. One's actions influence another. Our actions are not necessarily without some kind of action on someone else. And this isn't rhetoric, but it's a fact. So how do we apply the lesson of accountability to our relationships? How can we be more aware of our place in creation? We can look within to find the strength to own up to our mistakes. One of the things that we talked about with marriage preparation many years ago when we were doing that was to use what they call I language, which was to take responsibility for how one feels. I feel this, I feel sad, I feel angry, I feel hurt. Conversely, we don't blame another for how we feel. We take ownership of our feelings and we take ownership for our circumstances. And perhaps what we can do is that we can extend the grace we receive to another by realizing, first of all, that no one is perfect, that we all make mistakes. And we also must be cognizant that we are held to account by God and our community. We do not walk or stand alone in this. And if we're able to act and speak in humility, with grace, with love, with maturity, then we will indeed be a different person. This will lead us to spiritual and emotional maturity, or to put it theologically, this will help us to grow into the full stature of Christ. And this will take hard work. We may have to examine our current relationships or deal with past relationships, familiar or otherwise. We will have to look deep within at who we really are and own up to who we really are in order to be able to relate better to others. One of the things that strikes me about the call to love God, self, and neighbor with everything you have is that in a sense, it has to be, first of all, learning how to love oneself. Because it's in loving oneself that one then becomes accountable to one's neighbor and to God. If you love oneself first, if you love yourself first, then you will have the capacity not only to love your neighbor as yourself, but God as well. And that's an accountability that we have. And I think as we explore this theme further on in the following weeks, we'll see that accountability is one of the attributes one needs in order to deal more fully with being a part of creation. And perhaps, and really more precisely, that is why we need community and each other to stay humble and loving and accountable. Amen.